Hello and welcome to the New Mid. I'm so excited to be joined by my friend Renee Bauer. She is a divorce attorney, an award-winning divorce attorney, it's a little tricky talking about divorce, but I think, now that we're in midlife, especially in the new mid, it's an extremely important topic. You've had a lot of clients and you've spoken a lot about divorce. You have a course coming up called the D course and also a podcast coming up called Happy Even After.
Right.
So I'm just so excited that you can be here and talk to my community about divorce.
Thank you for having me.
So good to be here. This is a hard topic, it's not one actually that you really want to talk about because you hope that relationships and marriages work out. But,
Right.
I've had some girlfriends go through some really tough divorces. One is still going through the divorce. It was supposed to be over in January, and here we are in April, May, and it's still going with lots and lots of money after.
Mm-hmm.
So
Right.
I was wondering, can you help break it down for us? Because divorce is so overwhelming and there's many different factors to it. So where would someone even begin?
So the first step is education. And whether you're in the state that I live in, which is Connecticut, or any other state, you still have to understand what all your options are. And there are options. And I think the mistake that so many people make is they hire a lawyer first and then figure out which path they want to go. And so when I say that, you have a traditional litigation path, which is you have lawyers in the court and the judge making all of these decisions for you, which also happens to be the most expensive way to do this. But you also have this non-adversarial approach, which could be mediation or the collaborative approach. Now, not every lawyer practices in mediation or has been trained in the collaborative. So the mistake that people make is they hire a lawyer and then say, oh, we want to mediate, to find out the lawyer doesn't mediate. And so what happens is, of course, the lawyer is going to say, oh, mediation isn't the way you want to go, because they don't want to lose the business. And so now you're doing things in a way that maybe didn't have to happen. Maybe you didn't have to go to court. Maybe the conversation with your spouse is, how do we want to do this? And what do we want the end to look like? So first learning what your options are, and then researching and understanding when you start meeting with attorneys, what their specialty is, and really digging in. So many people hire lawyers based on recommendations and referrals. And sometimes that's okay, but usually just because that person worked for someone else doesn't mean that they're a really good fit for your situation. So the person really needs to take some responsibility in advocating for themselves and finding someone that's going to be the best fit for their situation.
Okay, well, you might not even know what the best fit is for you, because there's a lot of things, if there's children involved, finances. So can you break down, like, when do you file for a divorce? What is that process like? What do you need to think about?
Yeah. So, and part of going to a consultation with an attorney is the attorney should be explaining all of the different options before they're even hired. Before you sign that retainer agreement, they should be saying, hey, here's what you have to think about, and all of that. So, when to start filing or when do you file is really such a personal decision as to when you're ready. Sometimes people just gather information and they're not ready to file, and that's okay, because they really should start thinking about gathering financial information. And if they're not the person who has primarily handled finances in the marriage, they might want to get a head start on that and start really putting together documents, putting together tax returns, bank statements, things that they normally may not have looked at. If they start early enough and say, okay, maybe the divorce would happen, but maybe it will be a few months down the road, I'm not quite ready, at least they can be prepared for it. So even if they're not ready to actually file the papers, they could still have that meeting with an attorney, learn how the process works. And it's a little different in every state, but at least universally, putting together the information is going to be something that anyone should be doing.
Well, it might be hard to put information together because you're maybe hoping that the marriage will work out, or you're thinking it'll be less expensive to get a divorce, you to stay married, and you know,
Mm-hmm.
because divorce is expensive, or there's a lot of guilt and shame that goes with that.
Yeah, yeah, there's so much shame. I think that's a common question that someone, when they come in to see me, asks, and it's, how do you know? How do you know
Yeah.
when it's time and when it's ready? And so the common people have this debate between their heads and their hearts, and their head will talk them out of anything. And I always tell people, when you know, not in your head but in your heart, that it's the right decision, that's when you know. Because you could be, your gut, your heart is going to be telling you something else, and your head's going to talk you out of anything, and you're going to come up with all of the, that's where guilt seeps in. And what am I doing to my family, and will my children be okay? And that's where all of the questions come in. And the best way to address that is educate yourself. And I think the more answers you have, the more at peace you can be with the process, and that you can come out the other end and be okay.
Well, how, if you have children, how do you tell the children?
Yeah, so I always suggest that you do it as a united front. Anything, even starting now to post divorce, when you're trying to co parent, um, sitting down together and telling the kids, together, and explaining to them that it's not their fault, and that they're going to see both parents, and that they're loved. Um, there's going to be some pain with that, and you can't sugarcoat that. You have to let them feel everything that they're feeling with that. And sometimes, a mental health professional can help assist with that too, if the children are in therapy, or if the parents are in therapy, and as to how to best address that with the kids. So it's letting them know that you're there, and that they can talk to you, and they're allowed to be angry about it, and they're allowed to be sad about it. But the more that the parents can present as a united front, the better your children will be in the long run. And that
Well,
goes for post divorce too.
well, it's interesting though, is here in midlife, a lot of times people are empty nesters. So
Hmm.
their children are older,
Right.
they're not at home. And is it different telling your older children? Because I'm sure
Yeah.
they're impacted as well.
Yeah. And so I always think that, it's almost harder on the older kids. And everyone thinks that when your kids get to a certain age, they're little adults, and you can share, all everything that you're going through with them. And I think that that's a big mistake. And they're still your kids, and this is still going to be a painful process for them. So it's not your job to treat them like they're your friends or your confidant, so that you should be sharing everything that's wrong with their other parent. And I think that happens a lot, though, because parents will look at their kids, and maybe they're in their early 20s, and will say, well, that they have the right to know, and I'm just going to share. And hey, guess what your father did? And that's that. Think about the burden that places on them. So it's a unique challenge when the kids are a little bit older, for sure.
So also your friendships, and your family, your
Yeah.
in-laws, that's tricky as well. You've heard the, oh, we have to pick sides, and then you're close to your in-laws. Now, how do you navigate that situation?
Right. And so I think the mistake that people make is bringing friends and family into the drama of the divorce. And friends and family want to be there, and they want to know what's going on. But it's your responsibility, when you're going through that, to set some boundaries and make sure that you're not oversharing, because friends are going to align. I mean, that's what they do. They're going to pick sides. And in order to, and you don't want that to happen. And you don't want, the relationship with the extended family and relatives to be impacted either, because that trickles down to the kids. And you certainly don't want, any grandparents or aunts and uncles saying something to the children that maybe that they shouldn't, shouldn't hear. So, so much of this is communication. And in an ideal world, the divorcing couple will say, okay, this is what we're going to set some guidelines and rules, and we're not going to bring our friends and family into this. And, when I was going through my own divorce, I was from out of state. So a lot of my personal friends were my ex's friends. And that's just because that's the way it was. And so much of my friendship support system dissipated because they grew up with him and they were his friends. And so I think that is something that happens too. And it's unavoidable. There's nothing you can do about that, and you let those friendships go, that and you find some new ones, and you move on. I don't bring the negativity to it and draw them in.
Well, that has to be hard and lonely,
Right.
as well. I mean, there's got to be a lot of emotions going on because you're sort of losing a part of you,
Oh yeah.
and then
Mhm.
the fact that the marriage didn't work out, there has to be a lot of guilt and shame that go with that as
Right.
well.
Right. And you feel like a failure.
Right.
And that's the big thing. So for me personally, I was 5 years married, and had this big grand wedding, and I felt like a failure. Like, how do you tell friends and family, like, oops,
Right.
and
Right.
so you have that, and there's so much shame associated with it. And I think especially for women, and that they feel that so deeply, that there was something, that what could they have done to save it,
Right.
or should they have stayed? If they're the ones who asked for it, are they making the right decision? It's definitely hard. I encourage everyone to go to counseling during this time. If there is never a time in your life that having some additional support would be good, it's during this time, to have an outlet to speak to someone, so that you're not using your friends and family as that.
Right, because they have to have their own, not their own agenda, but their own thoughts as well. And
Of
it's not
course.
necessarily fair to be saying certain things to
Right.
family
And,
members.
and so and so the other thing that happens is friends and family will tell you that,
Right.
oh, when my so and so got divorced, or I knew someone who got divorced and got this. And
Oh my
so
gosh.
then that person goes to the lawyer and says, well, my friend got this, why am I not getting this? And so it's about expectations. And the divorce is definitely not one size fits all. The each situation is so unique. And so when friends start telling you things about happened with someone that they may or may not know, something that they heard, it certainly is challenging to manage your own expectations.
Well, it's interesting, and it's kind of funny to bring celebrities into this, but I can't help but think of Gwyneth Paltrow, how
Right.
she named this, we were uncoupling. It
Right.
became this whole
Yeah.
uncoupling thing, and they like went through a process
Right.
of separating, of slowly distancing. And you see pictures, they're all still really good friends, her
Hmm.
husband and her ex-husband. And then there's like Jennifer Gardner, who has basically saved her ex-husband several
Right.
times, but they have, family outings together and stuff like
Hmm.
that. So it just seems like you have to figure out what's the right kind of divorce for yourself.
And
Like, what is the mindset?
right. So the mindset is to love your child more than you hate your ex.
Oh, wow.
And
That's powerful.
yeah, so
That
and
is really powerful.
and
Wow.
but it's so true, because it's so easy to get stuck in resentment, and if your spouse has wronged you, and you want to make them suffer, but really the only one who's suffering is, first of all, it keeps you stuck. You're never
Yeah.
going to be able to move on if you are holding on to that negativity. But then it affects your children and their relationship that they have, their healthy relationship with both parents. And the example that I use is my son last year made his, or 2 years ago, his bar mitzvah. And I'm not Jewish, my ex-husband is, and we're both remarried, and there's other children on the other side, and we were able to come together, our blended families, and take up a couple different rows at the synagogue and have this wonderful celebration that was really united. And I tell people that if at the end of their divorce, they can look forward and know that when their children get married, they don't have to worry about bringing stress to their child because their daughter's worried about who's getting introduced with who and seating mom and dad at
Oh,
opposite
right.
sides of the room. I mean, that's really the test as to what a successful divorce looks like. And that's the everything, all the emotions of the divorce can really trickle for years and years into your children's life, and you want to be able to come together and celebrate with them and not be so still all kind of caught up in that negative energy that it's a stressful affair for you because you're watching who's doing what and who's getting more attention.
So to prepare yourself, you had mentioned earlier, if we can go back a little bit to, getting some documents ready
Mhm.
before you see an attorney to know the different things about attorneys. What are the steps someone should take, before they file for a divorce, when they're going through the divorce, and then after? What does that look like?
So, education and research is the first steps before anything happens. I tell people that they absolutely need to be interviewing at least two, but preferably three lawyers. Um, Lawyers have different styles, they have different personalities, and you have to really find someone who aligns with you. I mean, I'm a person who likes to communicate, and I like to, if someone emails me, I respond quickly, but not everyone works that way or needs that. So you really need to find someone who's going to mesh with you. So that's the first step. Really find the right fit and build your team. And so what does that mean? It could be a mental health professional. It could be an accountant, a financial advisor, people who can help you and support you through this process. So, especially if someone is not involved in the finances, you're going to want to have someone helping you look at a budget, maybe, and looking at how to save for retirement and what to do if retirement's getting divided and now there's going to be money in an account that you never managed before. So, it's really building your team. So, those are the preliminary steps. Um, During the divorce itself, the best thing that you can do is communicate with your attorney, and when they need something for you, to be responsive to it, and also to write down what your goals are. It is so helpful before you even start the process to say, here's what my main goal is. And everyone has very different ones. And for some people, it might be, I really want to stay in the home. And someone else might have something that's um, related to the children. So if you can set and prioritize what those goals are and bring them to your attorney, it can help your attorney do his or her job, because now they know what to focus on rather than going in and saying, I don't know what I want. And then after divorce, the divorce is done. It's you have to make the time to find things that fill you up. And it's so hard to become reacquainted with yourself after being in, especially a long term marriage. And it's almost uncomfortable for some people to say, what do I do with my free time now? And, this can be find a passion project. Um, do new things, try something that you've always wanted to try, but really dedicate time. And that word self-care is used a lot, but really that's what it is. It's being selfish about what you want. You've spent so much of your life dedicated to your marriage and raising children, and now this is the time to say, okay, what makes me happy? And taking those steps and actually putting them into action every week starts to create a renewed life going forward. And the woman who typically get stuck are the ones who sort of hold on to that negativity, and they don't use this as an opportunity to learn something new, to do something new, to explore, just kind of expand their world.
That is
So it's a
such great
mindset.
advice. Yeah, it's definitely a mindset. And I love how you talk about educating yourself, especially in your state, because there's got to be
Right,
a lot of different laws that we have no idea about.
right,
And
right.
so, doing your homework
Hmm.
to know what your rights are, basically, and then
Right,
filling out the goals with your attorney. But I'm sure there's got to be a lot of give and take as well, so
right.
that the divorce actually isn't contentious, correct?
Right. And that's where the goal setting helps, because if you have a list of 10 things on your what you want to accomplish, then you can really focus on, okay, one, two, and three are something that I'm really not going to have a lot of flexibility on, but the rest I will. And that's where you can start to negotiate with that. So yes, there is no divorce that has ever gone through without compromise. It has to happen on both sides. It's about uh, both of you coming to an agreement that is not perfect, and you probably both hate a little bit. And so then but then you really
Yeah.
know that you have something that's fair.
Okay.
It's, you have to give. There's going to be parts that you're okay with and parts that you hate, but then things that really make you happy about it. So
So, sort of non-negotiables.
right, right.
Now, co-parenting, that how is that going to look?
Yeah,
Because you might be really strict and a
yeah.
disciplinarian, and then your partner might be, I like how you say, something like Disneyland,
Right.
like fun. They're
Hmm.
always the fun one. And then you get that I want to be at dad's house,
Right.
I want to live with dad, or how
Yeah.
do you navigate all of that? How do you get in front of it, or how do you just deal with it?
So that the teenagers are funny. They can really manipulate a divorce, and manipulate their parents. So it is so important to have rules that are uniform in both houses. And I think that that's probably the most important thing as your kids get older, because they will start to use one parent against the other, and the child that has less rules at one parent's house, of course, is going to want to go to that house. I mean, that's just what's going to happen. Usually teenagers are kind of funny, because when the kids are younger, it's sort of like, I picture, one parent on each arm kind of pulling. They both want time with the kid. And then as teenagers, it becomes sort of like a volley, like no, you take them, no, you take them. And parents really need each other in the teen years, because they're so challenging.
Right, right.
But it's hard to start co-parenting in the teenage years if it hasn't been done in the earlier years. So it's setting some ground rules. The communication is key. I mean, it's really everything. And having those check-ins, and just if something happens in your child's life, it's sharing it with the other person, the good and the bad, so there aren't any surprises.
Right, right. Well, you might be used to a certain lifestyle, you, I, you have a nice house, you have a house cleaner,
Right.
certain things. What's going to happen to that after a divorce?
Yeah, and so it depends. It's, the famous lawyer answer. It depends. It really does depend on the financial situation with the marriage. So sometimes, if women haven't worked, they're being told by a judge that they have to find some employment. um, but sometimes there's enough income from one person that doesn't have to happen. And divorce is going to change your lifestyle. I think it's almost impossible, unless it's like one of those celebrities that we talked about, where the resources are
Yeah.
infinite, but that's usually not the case. So things have to change for sure. And I
And
think
that,
people really get stuck on the house too, is they don't want to leave. They don't want to give up their house and leave it. And it's a conversation that really needs to be examined, because, I could give you a lot of reasons why you don't want the house. And so even though it's an emotional attachment, from a practical perspective, it may not be the wisest decision.
well, and why would that be? Could that help your finances?
So if the house is usually where most of couples income goes. And so when someone has, and to use your point, you know, a nice colonial house and a housekeeper and a big lawn, and someone says, I want this house no matter what, but now there's half of the income. And even if you split the income in half and you each have the same to live off of, there's that much less money to go towards that house. And now you have to add in the upkeep and who's going to take care of the pool and who's going to take care if something happens and the maintenance for it. And it becomes, sometimes it takes up all of the income, and that is not a financially wise decision to make. You don't want to be house poor.
Yeah, it becomes a burden.
Yeah.
You know, it starts. I just think that your life just isn't going to look the same.
Of course not.
As much as you want it to, it's just,
right.
It's going to be different. So again, it seems to go back to mindset.
Right.
And
right.
realizing things aren't going to be the same, but making the best out of the situation as you possibly can. But I would imagine in the beginning, you probably have to spend a lot of time and energy on your children, if you have children,
Mm-hmm.
you know, and then eventually things become routine, you know, you take on new routines and new habits. And now holidays, is that all those kind of things? Is that what you figure out during the divorce? Like who gets what and all of that will be laid out?
Yep. So you do. And that can be a very detailed part of your divorce agreement, or some parents just say, listen, we can figure it out. This isn't going to be a problem. And they'll figure it out later on. Typically, holidays are alternated or shared or in some fashion. Sometimes Christmas Eve is extremely important for one person, and Christmas Day is really important to the other person. And then you're able to divide holidays up according to traditions.
Okay, so like you said, you're going to love it and you're going to hate some parts. So
Yeah. Oh,
that's
yeah.
when you know you've had a good divorce.
Oh,
Is
yeah.
there any way, this sounds counterintuitive, is there any way to thrive after this?
Yes, I think that you absolutely can thrive. And it becomes, it goes back to the mindset and using the time as an opportunity to really just renew your life. And divorce is hard. You know, there's no, you can't sugarcoat it and say, oh, it's going to be wonderful. And, you know, there's a grieving period. And they liken divorce to, I think, one of like the top stressors in the world, and,
Yes.
you know, death of a parent. And there's a grieving process with this. And you have to allow yourself to go through it. And sort of just allow yourself to sit in the mud and feel all of that. And then at some point you have to say, okay, enough's enough. And I'm going to stand up and I'm going to start taking one step and then another and another and another until it becomes more natural and the pain of it lessens. But you also have to be careful not to get stuck there, because you can get stuck in that mud if you allow yourself to. And I think that that's also that's what happens to people. So can you thrive? You absolutely can thrive, as long as you're taking some responsibility for what your life is and what you want it to be, and not just saying the divorce happened to me and now I'm a victim of this situation. It's saying, no, this happened and it was a moment in my life and it might have been an unpleasant one, but is not the end of my story, and I'm allowed to have an alternative ending.
That is fantastic. I love that. Is there anything else you'd like to tell my community about, you know, if they're thinking about a divorce or going through a divorce? Is there anything else?
Yeah, it's just that you can get through it. You know, it feels so awful in the moment, but there is a light at the end of the tunnel. And I think that the key to really feeling empowered through the process is through education and being proactive in the entire process. Don't let someone dictate to you as to what's supposed to happen. Like, you really need to become involved in the conversations about finances and about what the end result is, so that you're empowered to make the best decisions and an educated decision about your future.
Oh my gosh, that's powerful. That's wonderful. Thank you so much. And if
You're
someone wanted
welcome.
to get in touch with you, how can they reach you?
Yep, they can go on my website at msreneebauer.com.
Okay, great. And I'll put it in the details in the show
Awesome.
notes. Well,
All
this has
right.
been wonderful. Thank you all so much for joining us and being here at the New Mid. And until next time, let's go out and live an abundant second half.